It's Friday, so let's answer some questions from the listeners.
You are Locked On Royals, your daily Kansas City Royals podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are tuned into another edition of Locked On Royals on the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Johnson, and you can find me on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. That's at JOHNYJ_15. You also can catch us on wherever you get your podcast. That can be Spotify, Apple Podcast, Amazon Music, Google Podcast. We're on Odyssey, and we're on YouTube. Just be sure to hit that follow button and subscribe. If you're a first-time listener and you want to know a little bit more about me and this show, I am based here in Kansas City. I work at Sports Radio 810 WHB, doing some hosting, some co-hosting, and a little bit of producing as well. But when it comes to this podcast, when you click on this link, you know that you're going to be getting 30 straight minutes of Royals baseball. Today's show is brought to you by PrizePicks. Download the app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB to win $50 instantly when you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, run your game. Well, it's another week of us doing an earlier Mailbag Friday. Last week, we had to do it on a Thursday because I was heading out of town to go to San Francisco, so I wasn't able to get every single question that was sent in a little bit later. But I am doing this episode on a Friday morning. So if you see my tweet a little bit later on, you ask a question, and then you watch this episode and you realize I didn't answer that question, well, you can always reach back out to me, and I will try to answer it in a timely manner. I will be in town this weekend, so it's not like I'll be caught up doing other things where I can't get to that question. But if you really want to know the answer, just message me again, respond to one of my tweets with the question, and I will be sure to answer it on Twitter or X, whatever you want to call it. But right now, I got about 15 questions that got sent in when I put out the tweet. So those are the ones that are going to be going in this episode, of course, because that's just when I decided to record. I'm not going to be able to do it tonight. I got other things going on. So I wanted to make sure that I got this episode out before it got too late in the day and I wouldn't have time to do so because I didn't have an episode for you guys on Monday. So question number one comes from Michael. Any ideas for a leadoff batter? We had an episode, I want to say last week, about going after a leadoff hitter. And I know there are people out there that think Maikel Garcia is a good option because of the way he finished the year in the postseason. Maybe you were out there thinking that Michael Massey is a guy that can be the answer for the leadoff spot. But to me, I think both of those guys are better suited for lower in the order. And I think the Royals need to approach 2025 not hoping a guy can be something for you. You need to know what you're getting from every starter out there. And I even thought at times this past season, the Royals were maybe a little bit too reliant on guys turning things around, on guys having a better second half. And in the end, I think we saw when the Royals played the Yankees, they just didn't have a good enough lineup to compete with the Yankees. Now, the Yankees had the best lineup in the American League, and it's hard to compete with a lineup that has that much money put into it. But I would love for the Royals to go out there and spend money on a leadoff hitter or go out there and make a trade for a leadoff hitter, go outside the organization. One name that I'm starting to see a little bit more consistently among the fan base, not, of course, coming from the Royals, but Ha-Seong Kim, who didn't have a great year last year, he's somebody that I think would really pencil in nicely and has that flexibility to play around the infield. He's somebody that has tremendous upside. And what's even crazier about it is that this year, having an OPS plus a 96, he had a WAR of 2.5, 2.6. That's still incredibly valuable for having the worst offensive season of his career, really since 2021. But to me, and I think you look at what he did in 2023, had an OBP of 351, was somebody that could generate the walk, did have some pop, hit 17 home runs, and then took a step back this past year. I think he could be, one of those options for the Royals. And the Royals love to go after guys that could be due for a bounce back year. But honestly, if Ha-Seong Kim gave you what he gave you last year, which is an OBP of 330, that's a tremendous upgrade at the leadoff spot. So I think he's somebody out there that I would love to see the Royals make a play for. I think he has a player option, but it's likely that he's going to decline it if I'm not mistaken, because he was only signed through 2024. I believe there's some option there, but he's somebody I think that would pencil in nicely at the leadoff spot. He just turned 29 in mid-October. So he's a guy that isn't that young and I think could give you a lot of value both, at the top of the order and in the field. So he's somebody I've seen the fan base really be clamoring for. And I think outside the organization right now, he makes the most sense because of the unrestricted free agents that are available. I don't see anybody that really makes a ton of sense other than him and maybe Jurickson Profar, another San Diego Padre that had a tremendous season. Next question comes from Prepsley. It looks like he's actually got two. What do you think of trying to get Yoan Moncada? I'm going to say a big no on this one. Yoan Moncada is not durable. He is somebody that the White Sox grew increasingly frustrated with in 2024. And it's not just 2024 that Yoan Moncada has a problem of staying healthy, right? And even when he was healthy, the numbers weren't really there. If this was, 4 years ago, I think it would have been nice to make a play for Yoan Moncada, but I'm not even sold that he's a starter anymore, right? At the big league level. I don't know if he is durable enough to trust for a 162 game season. So I would stay away from Yoan Moncada just because I think the Royals really want somebody they can count on for 140 to 160 games. And Yoan Moncada is just not one of those guys. Prepsley also asked another one should we try to get is Christian Walker. We did talk about Christian Walker 2 episodes ago. I think he'd be a great fit. If you're looking for the middle of the order, I mean, man, I think a tremendous upgrade for this lineup would be getting somebody like Ha-Seong Kim and then going after Christian Walker. There's your leadoff hitter. There's your middle of the order bat. And the only thing I would push back, kind of playing devil's advocate about Christian Walker, is that he's a first baseman. And he's really only a first baseman. And I think the Royals want to go after somebody that does have that flexibility in the outfield because they might view Vinny Pasquantino as their first baseman, right? That they don't want Vinny bouncing back and forth between first and DH. But Vinny's also had 3 years that were derailed a little bit by injuries or taken in a different direction because of injuries. I don't want to say last year was derailed because of injury because he still had a really good season before that broken thumb. But Christian Walker, I think, would be everything the Royals are looking for in the middle of the order. And I think he's affordable. I think you could get him on a 2-year deal, and you've got a guy in the 5 or the 6 hole that could run into 25 to 30 home runs, driving anywhere from 95 to 105, have an OBP north of 330, have an OPS plus north of 110. All of those numbers would be tremendous for a Royals lineup that really after Salvador Perez, they didn't have the thump that they really needed. And Christian Walker would provide that thump for the heart of the order. Aiden's question is it realistic to think the Royals payroll could reach up to 140, 150 million? I don't think it's out of the question. I envision the Royals just kind of taking the same approach they did last year. Maybe not as aggressive as they, went after the starting pitchers. I think they really want Michael Wacha back. That, to me, might even be the first move they would make. And that's probably a 2 or 3 year deal. Because Michael Wacha, now that I'm starting to get a better feel of what Michael Wacha would be looking for, I think he turns down the player option. But I'm still of the belief he and Kansas City work something out because Michael Wacha loves it in Kansas City and Kansas City loves Michael Wacha. I think they could be restructuring something where you give him a 2-year deal or a 3-year deal, anywhere from 18 to 20 million. That I think would absolutely keep him in Kansas City, especially if you went the 2-year deal route. If you went the 2-year deal route, you could probably get something in the ballpark of 2-year, 36 million. I think that would absolutely be in play for a guy like Michael Wacha. And then you factor in adding 2 bats to the lineup. I think that's going to increase the payroll a good amount because some of these hitters are going to be going for a little bit more of a pricier range. So I do not think that's out of the question. John Sherman will go to J.J. Picollo and say, hey, what do you need? What are you going to be looking for? And I'm going to provide it. And that's what we saw last year. I envision it happening this year. I really don't think there is a restriction that you look at and say, oh, there's no way the Royals go past that. Now, are they going to spend, in the top 5% of what Major League, the top teams in Major League Baseball spend? No, I don't see them being in that top percent of all the 30 teams out there. But I can see them hanging around the middle, right? Getting anywhere from the 15 to 23 range of all of Major League Baseball. And that's still a pretty big jump considering where they were for a number of years of just not spending any free agent money. Next one comes from Elijah. Does Blake Mitchell have a chance to make his Royals debut this year? I understand we already have 2 great catchers, but we can never have too many lefty bats. Not a bad question. I don't think they're going to get Blake Mitchell up in Kansas City until 2026. I would be really shocked if Blake Mitchell made that jump because he's also still incredibly young. And, with him being, in my opinion, the future catcher of this organization, there's not really a need until Salvador Perez completely falls off or they've got a lot of injuries. Really, Carter Jensen would have a better chance of debuting this year than Blake Mitchell. I think they want to make sure they really iron out everything about his game. There's still a problem with the swing and miss, but he's got a very good approach. I was pleasantly surprised with what I saw from Blake Mitchell in year 1 in the Royals organization. But, he finished the year in high A. So first things first, in 2025, I got to know that he can still hit and be a good hitter in Double A. And then if he has that type of transformation and he gets to Triple A at some point, I won't rule it out. I just say it's highly, highly unlikely that Blake Mitchell gets to Kansas City in 2025. We're going to take our first break of the show. When we come back, we still got a couple more questions to get to. That's coming up on Locked On Royals. You are tuned into Locked On Royals and the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Johnson. You can find me on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. Want to give a shout out to our first sponsor and our title sponsor in PrizePicks. You can now win up to 100 times your money on PrizePicks with as little as 4 correct picks. PrizePicks is the best place to get real money sports action, so you can join over 10 million users and sign up today. They also invented the Flex Play, which means you can still cash out if your lineup isn't perfect. You can double your money even if one of your picks doesn't hit. PrizePicks puts its members first, so all withdrawals are fast, safe, and secure. When your picks hit, you can get your money in as quick as 15 minutes. So sign up today and get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It is guaranteed. So download the app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's LOCKEDONMLB, LOCKEDONMLB, to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup over at PrizePicks. Next round of questions begins with looks like Show Me Drinkwitz. If we don't resign Waka, then who do you go after, or do we? Looking at the free agent list, these are all the names that stood out to me: Nate Eovaldi, Shane Bieber, Sean Manaea, Matthew Boyd, and Luis Severino. That is a list that does sound intriguing, and a lot of those guys were coming off great seasons. I mean, 2 of them from New York, and Luis Severino and Sean Manaea, they would be great additions. And the Royals had that connection to Sean Manaea, and I think the Royals have always wanted to go after Sean Manaea and envisioned a year like what he had this year for the Mets. It just didn't work out. Whether it be the price range or the interest from Sean Manaea, I think he would be my go-to if the Royals didn't find a way to bring Michael Wacha back. But I'll be completely honest and open with people listening to this. I am going to be really surprised if Michael Wacha doesn't come back to Kansas City. Like, to me, I would need to hear something that makes me believe a different way, because what Michael Wacha loved about Kansas City, I think, of course, was the coaching staff, his family's living style in Kansas City, the teammates, everything about it, he grew to love. And we saw that at the end of the year when they lost the Yankees in Game 4, kind of getting emotional about, these are guys that became your brothers over the course of these last couple of months. And the Royals, I think, really want to keep that rotation intact. And I think that Michael Wacha is somebody that they believe can replicate what he did last year. There wasn't anything that showed signs of regression, and you don't really want to gamble on a new guy coming in and not pitching as well. So I, for one, am going to be really surprised if the Royals don't re-sign Michael Wacha. But for the hypothetical here and for the question, I think my favorite option there would be Sean Manaea. Matthew Boyd would be the cheapest one. I could just see Matthew Boyd completely going a different direction after what he did for Cleveland. Cleveland always seems to find the best in guys like a Matthew Boyd and Alex Cobb, and they go elsewhere, get some sort of a deal, and they don't pitch as well. So to me, that would be the cheapest option you can go with. But if you wanted to go big, I think Sean Manaea would be a great addition to this rotation if they do lose Michael Wacha. Royals report asks, how much should we put into strengthening the bullpen? Is that an immediate thing we need to address? Honestly, I think the bullpen's the last thing they need to address. And the way I would address it is going after guys on minor league deals, try to do a Sam Long, 2.0 going into spring training. But here's what I got right now for the bullpen. Lucas Erceg's not going anywhere. That's one. Chris Bubich isn't going anywhere. That's two. Hunter Harvey's not going anywhere. That's three. John Schreiber's not going anywhere. That's four. Angel Serpa's not going anywhere. That's five. I would say Daniel Lynch is not going anywhere. There's six. Sam Long's still under team control. He's not going anywhere. That's seven. And then you look at that eighth spot, James MacArthur, Carlos Hernandez, Steven Cruz. I don't think I'm missing anybody off the top of my head, but the Royals could field a bullpen right now. And when you saw what Sam Long did on a league minimum deal, I don't know why you wouldn't just go that route again. And to me, when I look at a bullpen, you don't need to spend big to have a successful bullpen. Detroit showed us that. Detroit has a bunch of guys that maybe you never heard of, and they had an excellent bullpen. Cleveland does it every single year. I know Emmanuel Clase was a big-time move when they traded for him when he was with Texas. But overall, Hunter Gaddis, right? You had Stephan out there as well. Those were guys. Tim Herron wasn't it? Also was another guy that you maybe didn't hear of. You don't need to spend a lot of money to have a good bullpen. And with the way the Royals bullpen pitched in October, I think they're going to run it back with a lot of the same guys there. And maybe somebody out of camp surprises you, like a Noah Cameron that could join the big league club and beat somebody out in a position battle in surprise. But to me, I think the bullpen's the last thing they need to address. I think it's lineup. I think it's rotation. And then I would go bullpen. Next question comes from Cameron. Speaking of Noah Cameron, how likely is it that we see Noah Cameron in the rotation in 2025? I don't think we see him in the bullpen in KC, right? I think there's a chance you see him in the bullpen because Noah Cameron to me is not a prospect where you say, if we're calling him up, he's going to the rotation. Like the last time I felt that way about a prospect really was Yordano Ventura. I know Brady Singer, when they called him up in the COVID year, he went right to the rotation. Chris Bubich went right to the rotation. Daniel Lynch went right to the rotation. But still, to me, they weren't prospects where I said, there's no way I'm putting them in the bullpen. Just because I don't think even though they were top 100s, even guys like Jackson Kowar, I had this feel of, hey, if they have a spot in the bullpen, I'm not opposed to putting them in the bullpen. But when Yordano got called up, I remember thinking when he was in AAA, you just wait till a spot opens up in the rotation. And that happened in 2013 in September or late in the year. And he got about 3 or 4 starts before that season ended, which set him up for a big 2014. And with Noah Cameron, I don't view him like that, where you're only calling him up if there's a spot in the rotation. There's a chance that he could be a valuable guy out of the bullpen. If the Royals are pitching well and they're doing well, that's probably because the rotation's doing well and they're staying healthy. So to me, I don't see Noah Cameron taking a spot from Alec Marsh, or if Micah Wacha leaves, he would take one of those spots. I think if he does come up to Casey this year, which I do imagine he will, his first crack at it will be in the bullpen, unless it's a spot start because somebody is injured. This one comes from Tyrone. What's the possibility of signing Willy Adames this offseason and putting him at third base? I did see this question posed on Twitter about 2 weeks ago. I really like Willy Adames. But I do think a big part of his free agency is going to be playing shortstop somewhere. I don't think he wants to move over to third base, and I think he's going to have a pretty hefty contract. So right now I'm going to say it's unlikely. Unless he gives that willingness to move over to play third base, then I could say it's a possibility. Certainly a possibility. He would be cheaper, in my opinion, than Alex Bregman. I know we've talked about him a couple times on the show before, but to me, I think Willy Adames wants to play shortstop. At least that's been what has been said in articles before, unless I'm missing one out there that said he's changed his mind. He wants to play third base. I wouldn't hate it. Willy Adames would be a huge upgrade to that lineup. And when you got a left side of Adames and Bobby Witt Jr., you would love that. But I do think Willy Adames wants to play shortstop. And since the Royals have the best shortstop in the game, I don't see him landing in Kansas City through free agency. But not a bad question at all. Tate's question is, should we expect to see another step forward in MJ's defense this next season? I would say that it could. I know it's kind of a cop-out answer, to be honest with you. But, I look at MJ's athleticism. I look at his arm strength. And I wonder if what we saw this year was the best version of MJ Melendez defensively. Because as much as you can practice, as many reps as you can get, there's always a limit at what a fielder could be, right? I think we've seen the limit at what Vinny Pasquantino can be at first base. I think we've seen the limit of what Salvador Perez can be behind the plate. I think we've seen what Kyle Isbell can be. You can always have better defensive seasons. I mean, they track different stats in a variety of ways. But to me, I think what we saw from MJ this year is probably what he will be, where he's got a tremendous arm. He can track the ball well. He took a big step forward because he finally had a full offseason to prep to being an outfielder. I just don't know what part of his game that I think would be a lot better. Maybe just tracking low line drives, those knuckleballs that, can throw you off a little bit. And that just comes with comfortability, right? I don't know if any of the advanced metrics are going to look a lot better next year, but he will get better, in my opinion, at just reading certain fly balls. That play he had in Baltimore where he overran it, you'll probably see less of those just because he's getting more and more comfortable out there. So to answer your question, there's a chance. I think he could look a little bit smoother out there, but I don't know if the advanced metrics and all of that, the outs above average, the defensive runs saved, all that's really going to spike next year. I think what we saw this year is pretty much what MJ Melendez is going to be in the outfield. All right, we're going to take our final break of the show. When we come back, we'll wrap it up with our final set of questions next on Locked On Royals. You are tuned into Locked On Royals and the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Johnson, and you can find me on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. I want to give a shout out to our final sponsor today in FanDuel. Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That is FanDuel.com. And all week long, we've been giving you our FanDuel predictions, what you should sprinkle some money down on. I've not always been correct. In fact, more often than not, I've been incorrect on some FanDuel bets, but I am just rolling with the stars in this series. And tonight, you're going to see the stars on full display in Hollywood. Mookie Betts is somebody I have not put a bet down on yet, so I'll do that for our final one before Game 1 of the World Series. I'll take the over on hit total for Mookie Betts, so that'll round out my weekly predictions for FanDuel. Hopefully, I get some of them right, but you can do so over at FanDuel and do a lot better than me. Okay, let's wrap up our Mailbag Friday with the last set of questions here. This one comes from Bobbert Whip. Personal question. I hear you on 810 and listening to this, and now I go, hey, that's Jack from Locked On Royals. What's the coolest part of all the things you do, and what's your favorite show segment or role you play with all your media production? Good question. I would say over the course of being in radio and doing this podcast, my favorite thing to do, which this is going to sound biased, but I love going out to Kauffman Stadium and covering the games, through the media, going down into the locker room, the clubhouse, and getting audio, talking with players, all that type of stuff. Also, spring training was a blast this past year because there's not an overpopulation of media. Not that, I love all the people I work with. I love the people I meet in media, but when there's 40 people, right, it's tough to get a question in. It's tough to get those one-on-ones and stuff like that. So I would say covering the games or covering spring training has been my favorite aspect of working in media, just because I'm a baseball guy, and I think there's something so cool about covering a baseball game or covering spring training. So by far and away, I think that's my favorite thing to do. And as for a show segment, that's another good question. If I'm talking about 810, I guess I would say I do enjoy doing Chiefs postgame a little bit, or Red and Gold postgame show is what I do after each and every Chiefs game, except for last week when I was in San Francisco. I was actually out there and, getting audio from some of the players and coaches. But I would say, opening monologues and stuff after doing a post-game show. I did it a couple times for the Royals postseason games. I think that opening monologue is always my favorite segment because you just get to give your open and raw feelings about it. You can have as much energy or as little energy as you want. So over the time of doing radio, doing podcasts, I love quick game reactions because the game has just ended. You've already had the emotion of it, and it's live. I love the thought of being on radio, being anywhere live, because you can't screw up. I know I'm doing a podcast here, and this is not live, but I've always loved the idea of you're on with everybody listening. You can't screw up. You can't flub your words. You can't say anything bad. You have to be able to deliver. And I would say that, when you're doing a post-game show or something along the lines of that, people, when they're driving home, will turn on the radio and try to get somebody's thoughts. And when I can be that person, it's really fun to do. So I would say that's my favorite show segment to do. And I would say going to spring training or covering the Royals game by game or whenever I have a chance to get out there is my favorite thing to do in media. But love the question there. RB Carr asks, any interest in some of the players from Japan and Korea rumored to be posted this winter? The big name that is going to generate a lot of interest, but the Royals pretty much have no chance to go out there and get him, is Roki Sasaki. He is somebody that I unfortunately am going to say is going to end up with the Dodgers just because Yamamoto's there, Ohtani's there. There are so many talented players that can make an impact immediately. And I've always wanted the Royals to dip their toe in the water over there. I think that it is a endless pool of talent that you can find. And it's not like they're prospects where they have to slowly be brought along. They can come up and immediately be an impact player. We talked about Ha-Sung Kim, and when he came over, he was somebody that could immediately make an impact. We saw Yamamoto make an immediate impact because a lot of these guys are older and not everybody works out, right? Sometimes it takes a little bit longer for those players to get involved. But I do think of the names that I've seen, I probably need to familiarize myself a little bit more with the cheaper options because a lot of the guys that have been posted that will be coming to the States next year, they're just not really in the price range. So to tell you right now, I wish that I could give you a name, but as I'm trying to go on the fly here, like other than Sasaki, I'm not really sure who's 100% posted right now. I know there were some guys in the World Baseball Classic last year that I think were rumored to be coming over, but then it can get delayed too, where you think that guy's going to come over and they end up staying another year or two. Last year we saw Shoto Imanaga come over and pitch very well for the Cubs. I think his name was Kona Takahashi. I can't remember if he's being posted this year. Another pitcher that maybe the Royals could look into. They also had, I'm blanking on the other name here. Murakami, I think it was. He was great in the World Baseball Classic, but I still think he's pretty young. So I know it's maybe not the answer you were looking for. Right now, I'd say it's unlikely the Royals go that route just because they don't typically go that route. But those are some of the names that you can definitely be watching for. It just can get a little bit hazy because some guys get posted and then it ends up not happening. Some guys are too young to come over to the States. Some guys just want to stay in Japan or in Korea. But I just wouldn't count on the Royals going after anybody just yet. Last year, they had scouts watching Yamamoto, but they couldn't come close to what Yamamoto ended up signing for the LA Dodgers. But do love the question. Blaze asks, thoughts on trading for Wilyer Abreu or Alec Bohm? Also, what would you think of signing Walker Buehler? If the Royals don't get Michael Wacha, you could certainly look into Walker Buehler. I am concerned about the durability, and the Royals do value durability in their rotation. So I would put him on the lesser chance of being signed. And as for, Wilyer Abreu, Boston loves him. He was somebody that was tremendous for them. And I wonder if Boston looks at what they did this past season and what Alex Cora has been saying to the media of how much of a disappointment it was. They couldn't get to the postseason. They collapsed right late in the season. They had a chance to take that wild card spot and run with it. And Boston's just not a team that I think is going to go full sell mode. I think if anything, they're going to try to add. So Wilyer Abreu, I would say, is not a likely option for the Royals. Now, for Alec Bohm, a little bit of a local tie. He went to college at Wichita State, did not have a good postseason, but still was an all-star. In 2024, you could plug him in at third base. And I don't know, maybe the Phillies were a little bit turned off by how Alec Bohm played in the postseason, and maybe they were looking to move on from him. But I also think the Phillies want to keep their core intact and make another run at it because they were great in the regular season this year, but then got beaten up on by the Mets. And it was a disappointing finish to the Phillies season. So I am very curious what they're going to try to do coming up this offseason at the winter meetings, if they'll be trading away some guys or really going all in once again and buying, because we know that Philly can buy just about anybody that'll be available in free agency. And lastly, Satchel's Page asks, who's the first position player prospect that'll be called up first on the Royals top 30, not including Tyler Gentry? My dark horse is Carter Jensen, but if I had to bet on one, it'd be Javier Vaz or Gavin Cross. I'm going to go with Gavin Cross. I think that if he had a really good spring training, that would springboard him into a spot where he could really have a good chance to debut early on in the season. Javier Vaz, I would like because he could come up as a fourth outfielder, right? And he's got that flexibility to play in the outfield. He can play the infield. He's a speed guy. He generates a lot of walks, doesn't strike out. I am curious, though, how that would translate to the big league level because there's just no power in his player profile. He does not really drive the ball out of the yard, and that's only going to get harder when he gets up to the big league level. But if they wanted to have a guy like Garrett Hampson and they didn't want to spend money on a Garrett Hampson type player, Javier Vaz could be that guy coming out of spring training. But I think they likely want to see what he can do at the beginning of the year in Omaha. So my money would be on Gavin Cross being that guy that would have the first chance to be successful in Kansas City of the top 30 group of Royals hitters. That's going to do it for another edition of Locked On Royals and the Locked On Podcast Network. I've been your host, Jack Johnson. Thank you for making Locked On Royals your first listen today. For your second, find Locked On MLB as baseball guru Sully brings a daily blend of humor and baseball, keeping you updated on every aspect of the playoff picture. Find Locked On MLB on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. We're going to be off this weekend, not going to be able to get that extra episode in, but not to worry, we'll be back to normal. I'm not going out of town anytime soon. So Monday through Friday next week, we'll be back on schedule and likely looking a lot more into free agency and maybe a deeper dive into Ha-Seong Kim because I know he's a popular name right now among the Royals community and people asking about him. So maybe we'll do an episode next week early on dedicated to that. But until then, you take it easy, Kansas City.